I would hope at least we're all now familiar with the ongoing scandal or the continuing unfolding scandal of the post office, well, the grand post office scandal, the Horizon saga. Take your pick. It's got three names you can choose from. But while in the meantime, this has now finally come to the forefront, and at least MPs now seemingly finally, care to give a damn about the complete injustice done to these people. There has been in the background more people trying to bring attention to one of the most, if not industrial scale medical negligence scandals in the UK that has ever happened. Now, if you don't know what I'm talking about, well, not a lot of people do. Just as the post office scandal has rumbled on for the past 20 years, this particular scandal has been going on since the 1970s. And yet, it has only been very recently that victims of this particular scandal have only finally not only started to receive compensation, but still are waiting to try and find the justice that, just like the sub postmasters experienced during their time at the hands of the post office, they too are trying to find their own justice, because as we are about to find, there's a lot of missing documents, and continuously MPs don't really seem to care. And as we've seen this huge, massive flurry of activity from all of these right-wing MPs, even Priti Patel shockingly standing on the back benches saying, how on earth could this have happened to our illustrious organization such as the Post Office? They have almost nothing to say about what has happened here. And of course, what we are talking about is the Contaminated Blood Scandal. So, before we go talking about more of this and go through the timeline of some of the events that have unfolded through this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page. There is the one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. There is the YouTube thank you button. And of course, as always, there is the Pony Club down below as well. And please do help spread knowledge about this, because I think this is a really important topic. And just like the post office scandal, this is a topic that some people do know about, but the wider public, unfortunately, know nothing about. So please, please, please do remember to click on the share button, because I think this is a really important topic that that people should know more about, especially as we are about to see, medical negligence on an industrial scale. So thank you very much to all those people who will, again, click on the share button, again, share this message. So what happened here? How did we come to see such medical negligence on such an industrial scale? Well, this all starts back in May of 1975. Like I say, this scandal's been going on for a long time. So the World Health Organization passes a resolution saying, hey, all countries should try and aim to have self-sufficient blood products, from stuff for clotting agents, enough for transfusions, etc. That countries should become self-sufficient in this. This is something that we should try and strive for. It's not unusual for the World Health Organization to put stuff like this out. However, in September also of 1975, they circulated another article publishing concerns about occurrences of a new type of hepatitis. Move on to December of that very same year, when an episode of World in Action highlighted the danger of hepatitis from imported clotting factor products. Notice the word imported, because as you can see, this is in the 1970s. We're about to head into the 80s, where, of course, if you are importing these types of blood, and as we're about to find out, HIV is about to take off big time. But Of course, before we get to that, we need to still talk about the 1970s. So, by the end of 1978, about 50% of England's blood products are now being imported from overseas. This is because we have completely failed to become self sufficient in our own supplies. BPL, a manufacturer of blood products, ran into continual trouble for trying to do this. They'd set up labs which just weren't, well, should we say, even ready for the type of large scale industrial production that was needed. Indeed, when reports looked back into this, the writer of the report said that production should have been stopped immediately, and under no circumstances should have production of any type of product been increased under the existing manufacturing conditions. So bad were the conditions in these labs. So as you can see, this was just continuously building and building and building up. And then, of course, we can get onto a study that got published in December of 1983, which showed conclusively that the risk to hemophiliac of contracting hepatitis C by using untreated clotting factor products was 100% upon first exposure. And then this is where we get into the 80s. So, in March of 1983, the CDC reported that blood products or blood appears to be responsible for AIDS among hemophilia patients. Now, remember, this is important for a factor because remember, the UK was failing to provide and become self-sufficient in the production of its blood products, meaning that now all of its blood products were being imported from America. And this is when HIV really kicks off. So in May of 1983, a Dr. N. Gibraltar, the director of the Communicable Disease Surveillance Centre in England and Wales, sent a paper entitled, quote, Action on AIDS to Dr. Ian Field, the Department of Health and Social Security in London, informing him of the death from AIDS of a haemophiliac who had received the type 8 corporate the type 8 blood product imported from the United States. Gibraltar said, I have reviewed the literature and come to conclusion that all blood products made from blood and donated in the US after 1978 should be immediately withdrawn from use and until the risk of the AIDS transmission by these products has been clarified. I am most surprised that the USA manufacturers of these implicated blood products have not informed their consumers of this new hazard. I assume that no critical warning has been received in the United Kingdom. However, despite the warning given, these products were not withdrawn. And of course, in September of 1983, a leaflet distributed to UK blood donors answered the question as to whether AIDS could be transmitted by blood products to be almost certainly yes. You can already see where this is going, unfortunately. But as I said, this is medical negligence on an industrial scale. So, in November of that very same year of 1983, the UK Health Minister, Ken Clarke, told Parliament that there is no conclusive evidence that AIDS is transmitted by blood products, and the importation of infected products did continue. When giving evidence to the Penrose Inquiry, which we'll get onto later, Dr. Mark Warner said that at the time Ken Clarke made this statement, all haemophilia clinics by this stage clearly believed that commercial blood products were transmitting AIDS. In January of 1984, Lord Garther, formerly the Permanent Undersecretary of States for the DHSS, said that it remains the case that there is no conclusive evidence of the transmission of AIDS through blood products, although it is circumstantial evidence is strong. And again, the use of untreated clotting factor products still continued. You have all this evidence, and yet it is being ignored. And now roll on to April of 1989. The HIV and hemophilia litigation finally commenced, in which culminated in December of 1990, when an out-of-court settlement following investigation by ITV's Cook Report later of that July in that year. And then things get even more worse, and of course there's a big jump in the timeline from 1989 to the year of 2000, where in the year 2000 the Department of Health lost on almost and basically destroyed evidence in what they have said was an arbitrary and unjustified decision, most likely taken by an inexperienced member of staff that was responsible for the destruction of a series of files containing minutes and background papers for the advisory committee on the virological safety of blood. So you now have the systematic destroying of evidence now occurring. And as we said, as we've constantly seen through all these points, you have evidence. The information was clearly known at the time, but there was almost no recognition as to what happened here. However, in the early 2000s, the Solicitor General for England and Wales, Lord Peter Arthur, campaigned for an inquiry now into this tainted blood scandal alongside Lord Owen, who was the health minister from 1974 to 1976, and Lord Jenkin, health secretary from 1979 to 81. In an episode of the 1999 episode of the Cook Report, Owen said, "I can see why some people would be unhappy with having all the facts revealed, because it would show negligence." In September of 2016, Owen later gave a speech in London during which he said that the scandal had been covered up. However, the late Lord Archer of Sandwell chaired a privately funded investigation set up in 2007. The Archer report was later published in 2009 and aimed to uncover the causes and events that led to thousands of infections and deaths. The report held no legal or official status and was unable to subpoena witness or even demand further disclosure of documents. Nevertheless, it sought to address the single issue of missing evidence and documents relating to this scandal. And of course, when it came to it, there was a quote here that says, "We've been able to ascertain who carried out the destruction of these papers and who gave the instructions. But the conclusion appears to be inescapable that some official made a decision of which he or she had no authority to make, or that someone was guilty of such a serious error of judgment that the consequences is that Lord Owen has done his best to try and recollect the details of the events of over a quarter a century ago. But both he and we have been deprived of the primary sources." So you now have clearly that there has been a lot of destroyed evidence from this. And remember, it is very clear to report that there have been, at this moment of time, thousands of people have died because they were hemophiliacs who have died because of this. And if you talk to people who were disabled or receiving, special care at this time, they know people, countless people who were victims of this. They knew people who died. They knew people who were perfectly fine. They went to receive the regular blood transfusion, and then they went downhill so rapidly, they just disappeared from school. So it is worth bearing in mind the sheer amount of negligence that appeared here. And it is shocking that, as we are seeing continuously through this timeline, the destruction of evidence that is going on here. Finally, this brings us around to 2015. So in 2008, the Scottish government announced that they would have their own public inquiry into the scandal covering Scotland only, chaired by Lord Penrose. The inquiry's terms of reference outlined the 5 deaths that were to be examined, but only one of those victims was a haemophiliac. The person that had been infected with hepatitis C in the 1960s as part of their treatment from haemophilia. The report was finally published in 2015, but it was described as an absolute whitewash, and a complete waste of public money of over £12 million. Its critics found that it had very little uh, that could have been done differently, and it failed to have any adoption of any blame in the scandal, whilst making just one recommendation: that if you had a blood transfusion before 1991, you should probably get a test. This, of course, brings us round to the big legal action and the UK public inquiry that happened in now 2017. So finally, a group of legal action is led by Jason Evans and Oz, which was brought against the government on behalf of more than over 500 people. And after years of increasing pressure from campaigners and MPs, Prime Minister Theresa May announced a full UK-wide public inquiry into the scandal. In September of 2017, a court ruling found in favour of the victims, allowing them to launch High Court action to seek damages. In 2018, the false ministerial statements are finally withdrawn. That we've seen of this, in June of 2018, the Department of Health did finally issue an apology because of the 2 years that ministers had told Parliament in relation to the contaminated blood evidence that all documents up to 1995 are available through the National Archives. Of course, as we've said before, and as we've seen, a lot of evidence destroyed in this, and it still revolves onto 2019, that it emerged that over 4,400 and sorry, that's still too big, but again, still a lot of files missing. About 450 files had either been taken from the archives by staff for the Department of Health and Social Care and just not returned, sparking concerns amongst campaigners that the department was trying to attempt a cover-up. And this is where we still are. This is where we still are, that justice has still not been found. And even recently, when these campaigners have tried to file freedom of information requests to try and get information from the government about this, the government itself, then remember, this current government, like right now, is in hysteria, trying to make sure that justice is finally delivered to these sub-post office masters, have now having government lawyers trying to interfere, stop and delay freedom of information requests requested by the campaigners for these infected blood scandals, who themselves are trying to seek justice, just like in the post office scandal, and the victims that have finally having their day, they are being denied. They are being denied, and the government is actively trying to stop this. This is another colossal scandal that is still ongoing, and that should have more attention brought to it, just like the post office scandal and people who finally, receiving compensation, getting their justice that they have so long fought for. The victims of the contaminated blood scandal, one of the biggest acts of medical negligence on an industrial scale that happened in the UK, seems to be still being covered up and actively being fought by the current government to stop any information about this scandal coming forward. And that's where we are at the moment. That is where we are. And that is why you have seen a lot of campaigners of the contaminated blood scandal trying to get their voices heard very recently, trying to raise their voices. And unfortunately, it's still not being heard, which is an absolute crime in itself. Just as it was an absolute crime of what happened to the people in the post office, that their voices were not heard for so long. You've had an even greater injustice where people who were meant to be given these safe, or what again they were being told was safe, when, as we've just been through this whole timeline, government and doctors potentially knew the risks, but no one was listening. No one appeared to be listening to this. There should be an inquiry to find out what happened here, what went wrong, why has there been a cover-up on this, who were these people who went out and destroyed documents, who gave the order. There needs to be a real inquiry into just what went on, in just examining that part alone, but also ensuring that those people and those victims not only receive the compensation that they need, but they also get the justice that they deserve as well. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.